Hi, my name's Paul Grogan and welcome to another Gaming Rules Review. In this video, I'm going to be telling you what I think about Crystal Palace, which is a board game published in 2019. Original publisher is Feuerlandspieler, published in America by Capstone Games, Italy by Cranio Creations, and various other publishers around the world. This game is one of two games that my Patreon supporters voted on as a game that I would review in the month of March 2020. So if you like the content that I make and you want a chance to vote on the games that I'm going to review this month, then please head on over to patreon.com/gaming rules, and any support you can offer there is greatly appreciated. Before I start the review, just wanted to let you know I have played this game 3 times at the play counts of 2, 4 and 5. So this review is based on those plays. Crystal Palace is a 2 to 5 player game set around the time of the first World's Fair, which was in London, believe it or not, in Crystal Palace. The game spans the years 1849 to 1851, and each player takes on the role of one of 10 different nations that is basically trying to get their inventions and prototypes, recruit powerful characters to help them try to win. You win the game by having the most victory points at the end of it. The game is played over 5 rounds, and it is a Euro-style game, and I'm going to explain what I like about the game, and then a couple of things that I'm not sure about. Now, my first exposure to this game was, I think it was at either Origins or Gen Con 2019. I think it was Origins. And I saw a prototype of it being played. And just looking at it, I was like, yep, that's a game which I'm definitely going to like. I can pretty much tell, this particular style of game. You can tell just from looking at it and looking at the pieces and how everything is, that it's the kind of game that I would like. Now, this was one of the 3 games that fit into my nice sweet spot of medium to heavy crunchy Euros of last year. There was Maracaibo and there were Cooper Island. Now, Maracaibo and Cooper Island, I did bring back for Messenspiel with me. And as I was playing them, I was telling friends about them and they were saying, and I was basically saying, these are my top 2 medium to heavy Euro games of last year. And they went, yeah, but you've not played Crystal Palace yet. And a lot of them were telling me that I really need to play Crystal Palace because it's very likely going to be included in there along with those other 2 games. So I contacted Feuerlandspieler and they were very gracious and they basically sent me an ex-demo copy of the game. So this copy of the game, it's in very, very good condition, but this is one of the games that was actually being used to do the demos at Essen 2019. So very quick overview of how the game plays without detailing too much about the rules. It plays over 5 rounds. At the start of each round, each player will select, you start off the game with 4 dice, and you will basically, in secret, putting the dice behind your little box, you will set those dice to whatever numbers you want. So you never roll the dice, you set them to what you want. And then you have to pay for every pip on there. So you want the high values, because high values are better, but you're going to have to pay. So if you set a dice to a 5, it's going to cost you £5, and money is very tight. Once everybody has set the dice, you will then be placing those dice onto these 8 boards that are on the table. And the rules are that you'll notice that some of the boards, each space basically has a die value printed on there. And you can only put a die on there if your die is of that value or higher. So that's a tricky choice that you have to make there, is where to put it with the limitations of what's printed on the board. Once all the dice are placed, you will then resolve the areas 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in that order. And within each area, the dice are resolved starting with the highest dice first, which may not be the first one that was placed. So in this particular case here, the red die has been placed there, which is higher than the blue die, so red is going to go first. You will basically go through these boards, removing your dice and performing a variety of actions. You will get patents at the patent office, you will get research tiles at the British Museum, you'll get shares at the Bank of England, you'll get influence at Westminster, you'll get new characters at the Reform Club, you will generate buzz at the London Times, you'll do a variety of actions at the Port of London and also at Waterloo Station. You'll then be turning those patents into prototypes by paying a certain amount of cogs and energy to gain a benefit and points. And there's also a buzz track where you can unlock other benefits, the black market, and a whole bunch of other stuff too. So if you haven't guessed it by now, this is a fairly complex game. Is it too complex? I personally don't think so, but that's because I generally like this style of game. To be fair, this game is probably at the upper limit now of what I would like complexity-wise. Any more than this, and I probably wouldn't enjoy it as much as I do. And once you've played one game of this, certainly for me anyway, it all seemed to flow quite well. There's a lot to take in at the start, but as I say, it does flow quite well. For me, this is a medium to heavy game. I know some people would class it as medium and some people would class it as heavy. It all depends on what games you're used to. But for me, this is medium to heavy. Playtime, it says on the box, is 60 to 150 minutes. That's 1 hour to 2.5 hours. Bearing in mind, This is a 2 to 5 player game. The last 5 player game I played took 3.5 hours, but that was with a full teach and with some new players. So it probably is right. If you've got 5 people who know how to play the game, you can and don't have too much analysis paralysis, you'll probably be able to get a game played in about 2.5 hours. But to me, 3.5 hours, again, it's a bit long, but with the teach, I think that's about right for a game of this complexity and depth. Be aware though that if you are playing this game with 4 or 5 players, obviously the playtime is going to be longer, but also you're going to have some people with a little bit of AP, analysis paralysis, because of the dice placement part of the game. For example, if you're playing a 3-player game, you're thinking, oh, well, I want to put my next dice there, but what if somebody else goes there? Okay, I'll go here instead, right? And you can generally just think a couple of possible moves. In a 5-player game, by the time it gets round to you again to place your dice, 4 other people have had their turns, and all of the spaces that you were thinking of might have gone, so you're having to take longer to rethink where you want to go to. One thing that the game does actually scale quite well is these boards you see here. There's extra boards as well, and these boards are 2-sided. So you will use different boards depending on the different player count so that there are fewer spaces with less players in the game. So do I like the game? Well, yes, I like the game. I like the game a lot. This is definitely up there in one of my favourite games of last year, along with, as I mentioned earlier on, Maracaibo and Cooper Island. So those two and Crystal Palace fit into my sweet spot of games that are a good level of complexity and a good playtime and a good length and good interested decisions. So that's my trifecta of medium to heavy Euro games from last year. It is a coincidence that all of those 3 in America were published by Capstone Games. Now, full disclosure, I'm friends with Clay from Capstone Games, and they have commissioned me to do some other work for them, not related to this game whatsoever. It just so happens that they absolutely knocked it out of the park last year. They also had Pipeline and Watergate, which are also both very good games. So yeah, Capstone Games in America chose some very good games to basically be the American distributor of. Congratulations to Capstone Games for a stonking year in 2019. So what do I like about it? Well, I've mentioned earlier on, it fits into my sweet spot of games, of what I like games in terms of depth, complexity, playtime, complexity, I've said that again. Yeah, it just fits in there. The theme of the game, okay, it's Crystal Palace, it's the World Fair, it's inventions. I quite like that as a theme. As a setting, because does the theme come across in the game? For me, and I say this in so many of my reviews, I'm probably boring everybody. I'm boring myself by repeating it over and over again. But the theme of the game, I don't feel, comes through in the actual game mechanisms itself. There's not a problem because I don't mind that. I play a game for how good the game is and the mechanisms within the game. The fact that you go to the British Museum to get research tiles, they're tiles with icons on that do stuff. They are the same icons you will find in other places of the game, okay? The Bank of England issues shares, okay, that gets you income. Okay, so I can see that because it's income, but you also get income on other tiles as well. The artwork is nice, and as I say, the theme is nice. I'll come on to artwork later. The cards themselves, they're quite cool, right? You've got this here. This is the thinking machine. It's quite nice. It's got a pretty picture. But in the end, all it does is it has a cost, it has points, and it has a benefit. And I don't think that benefit is really at all related to the card itself. Okay, now I might be wrong on this, but I'm just seeing a whole bunch of icons and moving counters around on different tracks. I'm not seeing much thematic connection with the choices that you have in the game, and that's fine with me. As I say, I don't play games for the theme, but I did want to mention that the setting of the game is quite cool and I quite like it, but I also wanted to mention that, you know, there's the theme as well. So other things I like about the game, well, it's worker placement. I always like worker placement games. I've liked worker placement games since worker placement games started, but in this game, it's got the twist. First of all, it has that massively important decision right at the start of the round is, what do I set my dice to? Now, normally I don't like games where you've got to try and guess at what the other players are trying to do. But in this game, it's like, oh, well, I could put this to a 4, but what if they put theirs to a 5? Oh, maybe I'll put mine to a 5 because I kind of want that particular one and I think they're going to go in there and they might. You're making that choice almost for every dice. Then you've got to pay for them. Then where do you place the dice? And then the order in which they're resolved, that part there is just very, very clever. The way that You know, you can go into a certain area with a dice of higher value and you will get to go before them, and you can basically snipe the particular thing that they wanted. That core mechanism of choosing your dice, paying for your dice, and then the dice placement, that is one of my favourite parts of the game, because you have to expend a lot of brain power thinking about what you want to do, and that is the satisfaction I get out of games like this, is putting that amount of effort into it, seeing how everything plays out, and then getting it back. Hopefully, of course, if you don't do it well enough, you're not gonna win the game. The game has quite a bit of planning ahead and working out what you need to do. For example, the patents, to turn them into prototypes, require a certain amount of cogs and energy. They're quite hard to get hold of. There's multiple places you can get them, but you need to plan ahead. You need to think, right, I need 2 cogs, I need 4 energy. Where can I get that? And you don't have to get it that turn. You can save up and try and get it next turn. Some of the patents will give you more points if you do them later in the game. So you've got all of those decisions going on. Lots of little decisions. Another big thing I like about the game is, from my experience of playing it and speaking to some others, it is a game which seems to have a number of different strategic options that you can play in the game. There is this buzz track that I mentioned earlier on. There is one strategy where you can really go for the buzz track. You can do all of the actions in the game to try and push yourself up the buzz track. And that will get you a huge amount of benefits and loads of points during the game, end of the game, all sorts of stuff. But I've also seen a game won by somebody who didn't really bother with the buzz track at all. There is the money system where you can take lots and lots of loans to get lots of money. And again, I have seen a game won by somebody who took, I think, no loans, maybe one, but very few. And I've seen another game won, or I've heard about another game won by somebody who took lots of loans. So there are so many different approaches to this game, so many different, strategic opportunities to play the game in different ways. And from the knowledge that I have at the moment, of course, this might be proved wrong in a year's time when people say, oh, this strategy is broken. But so far, everything looks like it's quite balanced. Now, speaking of the loans, I am going to touch on one negative that I wasn't keen on in the game. When you take a loan, you basically get one of these random loan tokens. It is worth up to minus 10 points, but it's random what you get. And that feels odd in a game like this, which is a medium to heavy, in my opinion, Euro game, with lots of interesting decisions and lots of calculations of numbers that's all visible and printed. When you take a loan, for it to be worth a variable number of negative victory points, it's not a big problem, but it just feels odd in a game like this. I'm not sure why that is the case. I'm sure there is a very good design decision for it. I just don't know what that is. Anyway, let's touch on some of the other details. Let's touch on the components. The components are really good. A lot of games these days are producing player boards which are thin, and it seems to be more common, but the player boards in this game are nice and big and chunky, and all of the cardboard pieces are chunky. Everything is all really thick, good quality stuff. All of the wooden pieces are good quality, and the cards are good quality as well. So I had absolutely zero problems with any of the components at all. Some people said they didn't like the money, but I quite like it. It's not thematic that the money is different sizes, but I always say that money counters should be different sizes in games so that you can easily tell them apart. So yeah, money, even the money I quite like. Yeah, components all really good. Artwork, I actually like the artwork. It's a little bit quirky and it's a little bit funny, but I quite like the artwork in the game. I also like the overall artwork for the board. Now, a lot of people have said it's a bit boring and it's brown and it's drab. And as I'm looking at it, I'm going, oh yeah, I can sort of see that. But for me, it's functional and it works. And I have no problem with a drab looking board as long as it's clear and functional. Speaking of clear and functional, graphic design, congratulations to the people who did the graphic design on this game, because I think it is excellent. There is lots and lots of icons in this game. If you are not used to games like this, you're probably going to be overwhelmed the first time you play it. But there's so many little bits here, icons, and graphic design choices that are really well done. So here's some examples. The Westminster track, this bit here. Oh, if you look at the end, we've got a green dashed line. And what does that mean? That means if I go beyond the green dashed line, I get that or that. Ah, right, yeah. Visual reminders, really good. The black market is actually quite clever in the way it works, because in the black market, if you have an assistant in the black market, then during phase 2, every time you place a dice on the board, if you have an assistant on the 3rd space or higher, you can remove that assistant to take a cog. And if you look at it visually, the cogs are in this yellow banner here with the number 2, because yellow banner and number 2 is phase 2, and the banner only goes down to space 3. So again, it's a visual reminder that you can only remove your assistants if you're on this 3rd space or higher. And there's lots of touches like that in the game where the graphic design visually is reminding you of the rules. The game comes with an appendix with all of the icons explained, and to be fair, we only needed this in game 1, and I think I had to look up one of the characters in game 2. But other than that, once you get used to it, it's really good. So that's the artwork, that's the graphic design. Rulebook. Now, to be fair, I did not learn how to play this game from the rulebook. Tom Fox taught me at HandyCon. Thank you very much, Tom. But since then, I had to reread the rulebook to remind myself how to play before I did my video. Not this video, I've actually done another video, and the rulebook is really good. Well laid out, very clear, lots of examples, nice setup diagram explaining where everything goes. Yeah, well spaced out, a lot of space left. They didn't try to cram everything in. It is a little unusual that you get the credits page here after the component overview. That's really odd, but that's just an odd thing. Apart from that, yeah, the rulebook, I felt, as I say, I'm just flipping through it now. You can see lots of examples, very clear. So congratulations to all of the people involved in the writing and editing of the rulebook. I thought it was really good. So yeah, I very much enjoyed the game. I would happily play again. The 2-player game that I played of it was interesting. I've actually, as I briefly mentioned, I've actually done 2 videos for this game prior to this review. I have done a 5-player tutorial and playthrough video that is on my channel now. So if you want to see me teaching the game to some friends and then playing a 5-player game of it, that's on the channel now. And then a couple of weeks ago, because of the current lockdown situation, I did a 2-player game of this against Paul, who was playing remotely. I needed to play a 2-player game of this game before doing my review because I wanted to test the 2-player game. Now, my experience at playing the 2-player game was very different from playing the 5-player game, but it worked. I had no problems at all with the 2-player game. It was a different experience, but the game worked. I know some multiplayer games don't actually work at low player counts, and I'm sure there are some people out there that would say Crystal Palace doesn't work at 2 players, but my opinion is it does. It's just a very different experience, but it worked really well, and Paul still beat me. Now, another small negative about the game, just one little thing that I don't like about it, is that there is a synergy bonus between some of the characters and some of the inventions. Now, I get that thematically, that, you know, these characters are linked to certain, not inventions, to certain prototypes. But for me, that just felt a little bit too look-based, because the character that goes with your prototype, or vice versa, just might not come out. And that's down to no choice or anything else. And if it does come out, you've got to try and grab it before other people do, but it just might not come out. That synergy bonus is 4 points. Some people will argue that 4 points doesn't make much of a difference, in which case I'm not sure why it's there. So yeah, it's a thematic connection, I guess, but I wasn't too keen on that bit about the game, just because it felt a little bit too look-based. Now, another thing you need to be aware of, which is not a negative for me in this game at all, because I like games, as I've mentioned for the last 15 minutes, of this complexity and depth with all of these icons, but be aware there is a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff going on. This track affects that track. This bit affects this bit. There's this going on over here. I know some people that have told me, oh, they find that there's too much going on in this game. But just be aware of when you go into it, there is a lot of things going on, and your first game is going to be a learning game. But if you like the same kind of games that I like, then you're probably not going to have a problem with this. Replayability, I think, is actually quite good. The patents and the characters come out from a deck in a completely random order. They're not seeded at all, so you're going to get that. There is a counter or a tile that you put on the buzz track, and I think there's 4 of them in the game, and they're double-sided, and you choose one of those at the start of the game, so that's going to add to replayability. And then, of course, you've got the choice of the other players and the actions you're playing against them. So I think the replayability is quite high. There are 10 different nations that come with the game. There's 5 player boards. Each one is 2-sided. You're supposed to assign them at random and then get a random side. And each one of them, they're not like full asynchronous powers, but they have a particular track that you're trying to work towards to get more points. And the objectives of each one are slightly different. So depending on which nation you've got, will depend on certain things that you're trying to do in the game. And one other little thing, there's no tiebreaker rules. And I think Every game should have tiebreaker rules in there. It's not really even in there at all. So yeah, there was one game I think that I know of that tied, and there's no tiebreaker rules in there, and that just felt a bit odd. Anyway, Crystal Palace, one of my favourite games from last year, in my top 3 of medium to heavy Euro games from last year, definitely. But if you want somebody else's opinion, I spoke to Vital Lacerda this week, and this is his favourite game from 2019, and I've got a quote from him. Crystal Palace is filled with tension from beginning to end. You are always finding yourself looking for the best decision to make your move. The uncertainty of being outbid by your opponents is one of the best that I've found in a Euro game. And there we go, my review of Crystal Palace. Again, thank you very much to Fuhrlandspieler for the copy of the game. I've played it a few times, I'll happily play it again. And yeah, there we go. Thank you very much to all of my Patreon supporters for basically making these videos possible. As mentioned at the start, if you like the content that I create, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Until next time, take care and thanks for watching. Gaming Rules is proudly sponsored by Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Visit GameToppersLLC.com.